so in this second podcast in our series, we're going to continue to look at fraud and cybercrime in hard times. We're joined by my colleague Vasilios, and I won't say his full second name, so I've always struggled with it, but I'll get Vasilios to introduce himself. We're going to look at some of the challenges and issues of cybercrime that are emerging at the moment with the coronavirus outbreak. So, Vasilios, could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your research interests and what you do?
Thanks, Mark. Yes. So my name is Vasilios Karagiannopoulos. I'm a reader in cybercrime and cybersecurity at the Institute of Criminal Justice Studies, working together with Mark. I have published on various issues in relation to cybercrime, hacking, hacktivism, and I'm also the director of the Cybercrime Awareness Clinic, which is a project that facilitates the development of cyber awareness advice and provides guidance to the community and vulnerable groups in general, working with different sort of organizations like the National Cybersecurity Center in providing better advice to small organizations or young people, older people in relation to fraud, cybercrime, all sorts of different aspects. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Vasilios. So we've seen lots of examples in the media of new types of cybercrimes emerging. Do you think that the current situation we're in has led to an increase in cybercrime?
Well, everyone seems to think it has, and it would make sense because on the one hand, obviously, you've got more people being online for more time, and especially the added amount of people might not have the adequate experience of being online for so many hours and on so many levels, working from home, entertainment, even talking to friends and family when they didn't have to do that online before. So we have a lot more possible victims online. And also the fact that criminals and cyber criminals can only operate online for the most part has created additional opportunities for them in terms of taking advantage of our fears, our concerns of COVID, and creating new types of frauds, new types of scams, ransomware, attacking different stakeholders and all that. So definitely there's been reports from the government, the FBI, that there's a large increase in reporting of cybercrime as well. Mm-hmm. So it is an ideal environment for cyber criminals at the moment.
Mm-hmm. What sorts of crimes have you seen emerge? I mean, are they more cyber dependent, more cyber enabled, a mix of both? Perhaps if you could just talk us through some of the things you've picked up on.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of different crimes. They're not necessarily new types of crime, but they're taking advantage of COVID in order to sort of reinforce what fraudsters and cyber criminals were trying to do before in terms of identifying new victims or new ways of tricking people into clicking on links or buying stuff online they shouldn't be buying. So, for example, we've got phishing campaigns that are taking advantage of COVID websites, essentially. So someone is looking for COVID-related information. They try to find a web page. They think this is a legitimate kind of web page providing information for COVID, but the cyber criminals have created a fake web page with links that either infect people's computers or request for credentials when they shouldn't be. And obviously this is not a new way of doing it. It's a new way of doing it, but you know, it's a new type of crime. We've got ransomware, so essentially cyber criminals, and this is more cyber dependent, as you say. So cyber criminals would target computer systems in medical, scientific, or other health-related facilities, and they would encrypt the data, lock the users out of these networks, and then request money and ransom, essentially, in order to allow access to the data and free the computers from the malware. that they've been infected with. There have been attacks on critical infrastructures and international organizations dealing with a problem such as the World Health Organization. And obviously, one major issue is teleworking. So as I mentioned, there's loads of people working from home, and the offenders obtain access to different systems or corporate systems, company systems of organizations, and they target employees using all sorts of different methods, such as emails coming presumably from the CEO asking them to click things or pay an invoice or something like that. We also have fraud schemes of people being, tricked into buying, let's say, protective equipment or disinfectants or other medicines that seem to be cures for COVID. And I think, lastly, one of the major things we see is the amount of misinformation and fake news in relation to this issue, which is spread on social media by trolls and other people to create panic or get people to click on links because of that panic. And we've even seen that some people have died because of misinformation in relation, for example, to alcohol consumption, curing or protecting against COVID, and people have poisoned themselves by drinking large amounts of poor alcohol.
That's terrible. And what's the worst example you've come across in the last few weeks?
Well, in my view, the worst example is ransomware actually attacking health-related facilities. Obviously, in a time of a pandemic, the last thing you want is people in these facilities not being able to do their jobs in terms of providing support for patients, doing research in terms of new medicine or vaccines. So definitely, from an ethical perspective, I think this is the worst. Another aspect is obviously offering to sell cures for COVID. That a lot of people might have relatives that are in very dire situations, and they might feel that this will give them hope and provide some support for sick relatives and friends. And they spend their money. Obviously, these are priced very highly, so they spend a lot of money, and they never even get the medicine they feel. So, in that sense, I think these are a few of the worst kind of examples we see.
They're pretty sick, really. Those types of those crimes. I think we're clearly going to see quite a spike in these types of crimes down the track.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen websites that have actually spoken with organizations that use ransomware against different organizations, and some of these cyber criminals have said that they wouldn't use ransomware against health-related facilities, but some of them have actually said they don't have any problem doing that. So. This is a constant threat, and I know for a fact that law enforcement has been sort of redeployed, let's say, in different sort of missions to protect critical infrastructures in terms of the health sector and the retailer sector.
Okay. Now, we've covered quite a range of different types of crimes. There's obviously lots of things individuals and organizations can be doing. But let's focus first upon individuals. What do you think they should be doing? First of all, in terms of some of the cyber-dependent types of crimes, and secondly, in terms of some of the cyber-enabled.
So in terms of the cyber-dependent, essentially hacking, viruses, ransomware, and all these crimes that we didn't used to have before computers, but are now targeting our computers and networks. Essentially, I think it's very important for everyone to have updated software on their computers. So if you have any software updates that you haven't really done so far, now it's a good time because they usually contain important security updates as well. Another issue is obviously having an up-to-date antivirus software on all devices. And another important aspect is changing your password on your router in case your router gets hacked. All communications could potentially be seen by cyber criminals, and doing regular scans with your antivirus to make sure there's no infection. I think these are important aspects for cyber dependent. Now on the more cyber enabled, so let's say phishing scams and online frauds, the advice is probably similar to the advice we used to give before COVID. So if an offer is too good to be true, then probably is. So don't buy something that seems to be a miracle cure, or something that seems to be very cheap, even though it shouldn't be at this time. And always buy from reputable sources. Double check any information you receive. We've seen examples of cyber criminals sort of using bank-related emails or even government messages. So I saw an example that was actually using the same platform as the platform that the government was using in relation to sending out messages for COVID. So it looked like the text you would receive was a follow-up of a legitimate kind of government message, but it wasn't. And that would ask you to click on a link to get more information. So I think one of the government campaigns I like in relation to cyber dependent and cyber enabled as well is the Take 5 campaign, which actually encourages everyone to take 5 minutes to think a bit more about cybercrime and whether they should respond to an email, or whether they should click on a link, or whether they should pay the amount of money that the email is asking for some particular situation. And I think if we go past the fear and the urgency that we might be feeling during this period, we might be able to spot certain signs that would indicate something is amiss in the message that we have received, and we might spot a cybercrime attempt before we fall victim to it. Obviously, don't click on links from unsolicited emails and messages. Make sure you check where the message is coming from. If it's coming from a person you know and their usual email account, then it might be valid. But then again, a lot of people share information without really checking. So we might get someone who hasn't properly checked some kind of information they're sharing, and this is very important with fake news, for example, where people on social media share on the basis of headings and without reading the article or even checking the source. So this is quite important. Don't give out any personal information or usernames and passwords if asked. Your banks or the government will never ask you, or HMRC will never ask you to give out usernames and passwords. If you feel that there is an issue with your bank account or some other account that is important, and you receive a phone call from someone allegedly from your bank or another organization, the best thing to do is hang up the phone and call that organization. But make sure you've hung up properly, because in many cases the fraudsters would actually encourage you to phone your bank yourself, and then they would stay on the line. You would think that you've hung up and you've called your bank, and you would still be talking to them. So this is, I think, important. And definitely, if working from home, use a virtual private network that would connect you directly to your corporate network or your organizational network, if you have one, and that would provide some extra security.
I think one of the things that underpins a lot of that advice, that is my view, is always be skeptical of particularly anything that is unexpected, emails that arrive, phone calls that you're not expecting. Skepticism, I think, is very healthy in this climate. Now, that's excellent advice for individuals. What about organizations? I'm thinking about small organizations here, SMEs, those types of organizations. And obviously, some of these organizations have been thrown into really, interesting times, probably not had to kind of move to online working so quickly. Where can they go to for advice? What kinds of things should they be thinking about?
This is a very difficult question to answer, because obviously a lot of different organizations have different needs and different ways of operating, and they might be targeted in all sorts of different ways. I think a lot of the advice that we give to individuals is relevant for organizations as well. So being skeptical of the emails you receive and not clicking on links and using VPNs and all that, this is definitely something for organizations to consider. I think the main problem with organizations, and as you say, small organizations that might have been thrown into this very abruptly and without having properly prepared everyone in the organization, is the fact that a lot of members of staff might not be ready to use the platforms they're supposed to use, or telework to the extent that they are supposed to be working. And the process of getting used to new platforms, new software, and new processes of working, I think, is very risky, because your attention is not focused on being secure and being careful, and you don't have the confidence in terms of using these new platforms. So I think it is important for these organizations to provide some basic advice for their employees in terms of what the expectations are when teleworking, and how to best stay secure. Have some process of verification. For example, if you are going to verify decisions, payments, and all that, and you didn't have a proper sort of online process for doing that verification, now is the time to maybe establish one, because I think it's very important not to rely on email communications that might get hijacked. For example, if someone's email is hacked, and to always have a backup plan in terms of checking whether the information you've received is correct and whether you should act on it. I think for me this is very important. There's guidance from the National Cybersecurity Center in terms of working from home for small organizations in general, but also for working from home more specifically. And people can access that online, and it has some very useful steps in terms of setting up a teleworking kind of process for the organization. But in any case, not clicking on links, as we mentioned, and being skeptical and taking 5 minutes to think about it, I think is also very important. And similarly, using up-to-date software on all devices. One of the challenges, obviously, with teleworking and small organizations is that people might be using their own devices when working from home. And it would be the same devices that they're using in order to browse the internet more generally, use social media, watch Netflix and all the other services. So I think it is important to highlight the fact that there is an increased risk when people are actually using these devices for personal purposes in addition to work purposes. There might be a chance that there's more opportunity for infection or compromises when these devices are the same. And then obviously, if your account gets hacked on your personal device, your work information is also exposed. And this is another added risk when people are working from home using personal devices.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Vasilis. One of the things that you run is the Cybercrime Awareness Clinic.
Yeah.
What kinds of things can you offer through that to individuals and organizations?
So with the Cybercrime Awareness Clinic, we have a website that we can probably include in the comments below. And the clinic has, it works as a repository for support services and reporting services for cybercrime, all sorts of cybercrime. So any individual that is faced with a particular type of cybercrime, from fraud all the way to online exploitation, extortion, ransomware, and all that, they can find information in terms of support organizations and also reporting facilities for the different types of cybercrime. We also provide advice on a one-to-one basis if requested, and we can help, but in most cases this is not in order to resolve any technical issues or fix people's computers. It's more about pointing them in the right direction in terms of their victim support or prevention mechanisms or reporting mechanisms that might be there.
Are you able to offer that service at the moment when we're all confined?
We can try depending on workload and the requests, but if someone has particular difficulties with cybercrime related issues, then we can definitely see how we can help. So they can contact us through the information that is on the website, and we'll do our best to help out.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that advice, Vasilius, and thank you for watching this broadcast. We will make the links available to Vasilius's website, and any of you interested, please go to that website and look for some of the advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.